Shalom, Rastafari, Assalamu Alaikum, peace to the kings and the queens of the earth. How's everybody doing on this Monday, the beginning of the week? Just want to give everybody some motivation. You know, it's grind time, it's allergy season. Make sure you're taking care of your health. Get some sea moss in you if you can. If you got any questions about that, please reach out. You know, I'm already fighting my own, but the sea moss has already helped out, so... And I appreciate everyone who's been in the corner helping me out during these times also. Excuse me, but I wanted to go into, let's get to it, man. If you've probably been under a rock or you haven't seen what's going on with the Anheuser-Busch controversy, and I'm quite sure there's going to be some people who are going to be like, what are you going to talk about this? How is your angle? And I like to go, you know, when you step back and you take a broad picture or a broad angle or look at it from that lion eye, which is high on a mountain and just very quiet, and you're observing it and really taking it all in a patient type of a situation. You start seeing all the angles, right? You know, when you have a better view of something, you see all the angles of it. And I'm going to another angle on this. So basically the Anheuser-Busch or the Bud Light controversy is what they've made a stance, or they made some promotional things with a person who is kind of the face right now of being a transgender woman. They have done this project of 365 days of being a woman, and they have just, you know, caught a bunch of promotions from makeup companies and things like that. And for whatever reason, Bud Light decided to hire a different female marketer who then in turn started the situation and made this person, you know, they started putting Bud Lights on the cans, or they made her out to be, you know, kind of a promotional thing. Now we're going to skip over what I really believe, because that issue, I have talked to many people. And that's another podcast. I'm not going to not talk about that because what I don't like is that, you know, there's people who talk about my people every day. There are people who talk about all types of other people every day. And even when they are, you know, deemed, you know, some name that probably doesn't even make sense, they are still able to do it. This community has now created a situation where they kind of bully you into having an opinion. So I'm not going to not talk about it, but because it's almost like when I got told to, like, well, you know, they're going to come after you. It's like, I'm not scared of, you know, people coming after me for saying something that I know is from the heart. That's the whole thing. You know, I stand up and I'm going to say what I need to say, regardless. I've gotten to that point now. It's just enough is enough. You know, I understand. People can say, well, you know, they're going to come after you to make scare you. That's the scare tactic that we all can have amongst certain people. But if you have something to say that. And, you know, trust in that the Most High, the universe, will in turn protect you. Especially if you're saying it, you know, in a right manner. You don't come with hate. You don't come with anything. So in this situation, Bud Light, again, rewinded again, decided to have a campaign with a transgender woman who in turn did some Bud Light stuff, and they in turn lost $6 billion and counting. $6 billion. Now, I'm going to a different angle, because most people, their angles on this take has been, you know, what, you know, the transgender situation is. And again, that's going to go into another podcast, because that is going to be a deeper, more personal, more, you know, situation where I need to really say what I want. I'm going to say it accurately. And in this turn, this is just something that I looked at in the angle, and I want people to think about. First of all, Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch. I don't know if people who listen to this podcast, I'm quite sure there's a few that have, you know, drank or had Bud Light or have had beers in their days. Bud Light is not a beer that a lot of people go to drink that often in a specific setting. Let me be clear. Bud Light is not the best tasting beer. It's not a beer that gives you a heavy buzz. And I'm not even a drinker. I haven't drank and it'll be 3 years this summer, almost four. But in my day, we used to drink Bud Light because it was cheap, right? But ultimately, you break that seal. You know what I'm talking about. You're just peeing out water, and you're just drinking something to be drinking it at that point. Bud Light is the keg beer, right? The keg beer, the beer that you buy at the keg parties because you can get 2 kegs for cheaper, and then you just keep the the liquids flowing type of thing. Keep the beer going. That's what Bud Light is. Bud Light is the golf course beer for a bunch of guys who just don't want to get drunk, but they feel like having some beer, but they don't want, whatever. So they drink this light beer on this hot day. Bud Light is the, or Anheuser-Busch Budweiser. This is a sporting event beer, right? Football, hockey, maybe even NBA, golf, NASCAR. You see where I'm going with these things? College football, especially. So, one, let's talk about business, right? Let's keep it business right now. Well, I ain't gonna have to go personal, whatever. Go business. So talk about not. I mean, here's the thing. It was such a move to me that didn't make sense. The lady who was explaining it, she was like the new marketing director, and they asked her about this move before they started it, and she was talking about how, Anheuser-Busch Bud Light had this, frat boy, fratty type of look. And I wanted to be like, you better be lucky, first of all, that anybody buys your beer. One. Number two, it's not some kind of frat thing. Like the commercials and the group doesn't just have a bunch of frat people, frat college boys drinking beer. Now, here's the thing about it. It's cheaper. So you're going to get the 19, up in Canada, it's 19 or the 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds in the States. You're going to get them drinking that beer because it's cheaper and it's just something to drink. What I'm getting at is your beer isn't really like, no one has to drink your beer. And it's pretty quick. It's pretty clear with the statistics and the consumer what they have done. So no one really has to drink your beer like that. You should be fortunate that it's not a good beer. Budweiser, Bud Light, whatever these aren't like. The last time I had a Budweiser, it was disgusting. Like, I'm like, how do people drink this shit? And Bud Light is a little bit like less of a bite to it, so it's kind of like, but it doesn't do anything, right? If there's any other option and you can afford it, you're not going to drink Bud Light. So at the end of the day, this person comes out, talks about how fratty they are, talks about with this and that third. And I'm just sitting here looking back, I'm just kind of like, do you know the audience? Do you know who spends money on this light beer? And I'll break it down for you as American. The only people who I've always seen drink Bud Light, okay, are obviously people who are, one, again, I just said it, more sports-minded, down south, college football games, NASCAR racing, golf courses. You know what I mean? That the cheap Sunday beers. They're the beers you drink at the stadium, right? It's the beer you used to drink. There's a football game coming on. You get a 30-pack and order some pizza because it's Bud Light. Just drink the Bud Light. It's almost like something that's kind of lighter than water. And you're not really getting the buzz off it that heavy. Everyone's like, I was hammered off that Bud Light. No one does that. Not if you're somewhat of a regular drinker, right? So that's one of those things. So talk about not, or just really disappointing your entire demographic. Like literally just, I don't even know what to say to you. It blew my mind that this person was just like, yeah, we need to get frat. And then you did it and you lost $6 billion. For the simple fact, now, here's the thing I don't like. Anheuser-Busch knows who buys Bud Light, right? Anheuser-Busch knows who buys Budweiser. And I'm sorry, it's most of the time, it's down south, pickup truck driving, okay? And there might be a couple Confederate flags sprinkled in there. I'm being real. This ain't no like assumption, okay? The avid Bud Light drinkers are usually on a specific side, if you get what I'm trying to say. The conservatives, right? The Reds. Those are the Bud Light drinkers. Like, and if you break it down in numbers, like, this was a horrible move. Now, it was horrible not because even I'm sticking away from the opinion of the transgender woman. I'm going into business, okay? flat out. I'm sticking with the business aspect of it because I'm confused as like you act like you didn't know who buys your beer. Okay. Quick example of why they never should have did this and why they knew they were going to lose a lot. Like they didn't know, but this is like, how did you not know this? So let's go to the University of Tennessee. All right. University of Tennessee, Tennessee Vols. They decided, amongst other colleges, that they were not going to be serving Bud Light at the stadiums anymore in any event. Now you're like, okay. Now, mind you, this is why this situation is so crazy to me. University of Tennessee, I say let's just go with football. Okay, just like with football. They have a stadium that probably sits about 85 to 90,000 fans per game. Let's go to, let's say, 8 games a season. Let's just go on a basic University of Tennessee. They didn't even win their division or SEC, whatever. They're just there. They had a successful, let's say they won 7 games. All right. So they have a good home, game attendance. And regardless, they have to really literally lose every game not to fucking get that. But let's just say they're winning games. You're averaging 80,000 fans a game. I'm going to make an assumption that about 30,000 to 40,000 of those people have purchased beer. Okay? Maybe 30,000. More, you start seeing the numbers. So then at 5, let's say, how many beers per game? Let's say the only average, maybe 2. That's average. It's probably higher than that. So let's say 2 beers per person. Let's say at $5 a beer. This is cheap too now. So let's go 40,000 fans that, let's say, bought 2 beers for that one game. That's $400K plus the money that they probably, bought before the tailgating, all that. Let's put about a $500,000 just off one game now. Okay, one game. Now do that. Multiply that times 8. Okay, multiply that times then about, I'd say, another 20 to 20 stadiums. See how quick this can go? Because you act like you didn't know your demographic. Yeah, you did. Don't sit here and benefit off the people who you know are going to have a problem with you speaking or making a stance, especially about the LGBT community. Like, don't act like you don't know who buys your product, right? It'd be like, it's, you know what I don't like? If you made a stance like that in the beginning, say Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch were always involved in LGBT, they were always involved in, you know what I mean? Like being on the front line for those specific rights, for human rights like that. And they spoke up and they made a statement like, if you don't like our beer and you have hate or whatever, or you have, you're homophobic or you're racist or you're a like whatever, don't buy our beer. They never said that. They never said that because you've been benefiting. I remember the Anheuser-Busch, CEO comes out and makes a statement after all this. It's like, we've been around, and try to remind people about the tradition of how long you've been around. I'm like, yeah, you just proved the point. You didn't even apologize or you didn't do anything. Like, you just proved the point. You've been around since the 30s, and the people who have bought your beer are a specific person. You've probably benefited quadruple trillions of dollars over the past 70 years from them. And then all of a sudden you get mad when you make a stance and do specific things that will then hinder them from buying your cheap ass watered down beer. Especially in the light of the beer. Beer has a lot of competition. I don't think people know that. I don't know. In Canada, you may not see it because it's kind of spread, but in the States where alcohol is pretty available most of the time, beer has a lot of competition. I'm trying to figure out the last person that I know who was like, I'm going to get me a 30-pack of Bud Light tonight. And I haven't. Like, I'd be like, yo, at least go get some Molson or something. Get some and even in Canada, Labatt Blue and Molson aren't even, they like, oh, that's nothing. Well, specific places, they love it. We love Molson in Buffalo, So Bud Light and Budweiser, whatever, we don't really care. But do you notice how other alcohol companies are not going to make a stance like that? As a matter of fact, it's not about just making a stance on this specific subject. They don't make a stance at all. Why? They probably know who's buying their product, and they know that they make any kind of stance. You notice how there's not No one says shit about Black Lives Matter in the Anheuser-Busch or beer situation. That's one another thing I keep bringing up, is that you didn't make not one stance about when we were getting killed by police. Why? Because you know who buys your fucking product. But you decided to kind of go over here. My thing is, I think you got scared into it. You're thinking, oh my God, we got to make a stance because this thing is hot and it's controversial, so we got to let people know where we're standing. And that in turn lost you $6 billion in counting. I don't think you're ever going to bounce back from this because of what the stance you make and because of your beer already being watered down. We don't need to drink nothing from Anheuser-Busch. That's the thing about it. You don't have to. Budweiser, Bud Light, all these beers, they're not that good. Bud Light was probably the best beer just because it didn't taste like as much as it's lighter shit than the other shit is. Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't want to offend nobody, but Budweiser, I don't know how the hell you drink that shit. I used to drink it. You know why I used to drink it? Just because I just seen it on fucking commercials. The fucking horses and the the Clydesdales and you sit there and drink that shit. And then you kind of find out, I'm sorry, that the better the commercial, the worse the beer. I don't think y'all remember Busch beer? Busch beer had this big old black stallion in the snow. It's refreshing, but Busch beer is gross. Like, you go get it. You're like, let me take this refreshing stuff. Yeah, it makes you want to hurl immediately. Budweiser, same thing. You're like, oh man, Budweiser. You got the NASCAR racing around. Got the Clydesdales and Christmas. Let me check some Budweiser. Yeah, who the fuck drinks this shit? Like, fuck Bud Light. You on a golf course, you drink it. Okay, it's not that bad because it's light, right? You feel like you're drinking a little bit of beer with some water in it. All right, not too bad. Takes a bite out of it. No, I'll drink it. So nobody was really drinking your shit anyway. That's what I'm trying to get at. And the stance you took, I don't really get it. I don't, and I'm ignorant, but I have been around the community, the LGBT community. I've bounced at clubs where I've had friends who I know what they drink. None of them drank Bud Light, bro. I was just like, I think that you would see if the LGBT community, if you saw a vodka, let's say Ciroc made a stance and said, we are for two genders, they're going to probably see a little bit of a dip down because there are some all LGBT or all gay clubs that definitely serve that. They definitely drink, vodka. Like they like that. And then it could be a stance where like, okay, we ain't fucking with y'all. We'll let you know where the money is. So in closing also, I also, because I wanted to talk about this in a point. I'm gonna leave it like this. Black people, my people, and my indigenous people, or anybody who wants to protest, do you see what happens when you speak with the power of the dollar? Do you see what happens now? Do you see where you can hit these Babylonian fucks at if you have a disagreement or you want to make a stance? You think that they're not standing for your people. I'm talking to my own now because, first of all, when I go into pointing fingers, I always start with myself. All right, take the plank out of your own eye before you take the salt grain out of somebody else's. So I immediately go to my people. All right, I'm not going to just be pointing about everybody and blaming everybody else for everything. Fucking talk to my own people. One, we need to make our voices heard the same exact way when we feel a company or a supermarket or a corporation does speak against us or doesn't speak for us. I'm sorry, right? We invest so much money, okay, especially the black community. We're the highest consumer of frivolous fucking spending, which means is we'll buy money that does not come back to our community. We will buy things that are not, let's say, donating money to charities that have anything to do with black organizations. We will buy from people who do not care about us. We will buy from people who have made stances or have not said anything. We should make them make a stance. Okay? I got to get a salute just on a small level because I looked at this. I wanted to try a different pea protein, different plant-based protein. I'm getting tired of Vega. I see them all over the place. They're getting kind of commercial. I'm kind of getting scared. I'm going to try something different. And I went to this one different who I've seen around in a couple like, bodybuilding places and stuff, which was called the Iron Vegan. So I went to the Iron Vegan and I checked out their website. And what I liked was they made a specific stance on black culture. They basically said that enough is enough. They pretty much made it. You could tell they were making a stance. This was probably during the George Floyd times, but they made a stance. It's still there. It was pretty bold. It wasn't some kind of like half-ass statement. They pretty much made it clear that like we make a stance, for our black community, for our black brothers, and we will stand firm. So anybody who they're making a stance right there that says if you're a racist fuck, you don't even gotta buy my product, right? Regardless if there was a bunch of racist white bodybuilders, I'm quite sure Iron Vegan, like we don't need that shit, right? They're not gonna sit there and sell a product knowing that all of a sudden their biggest consumer is a bunch of racist people, and all of a sudden 5 years down the line, they make a stand, so they stand up for for black people or whatever who may not even be buying their product, and then they would get surprised when no one buys their shit. You got to know who whatever. So back to the point, as black people, we continue to invest in things that and I'm talking to myself too, because I've looked around and see if there's any kind of product or there's anything in my house that I continue to buy, and they don't make a stance or they don't say anything. And even on a small scale, I looked at Vega. They don't say one thing about the community. They don't make any kind of community stance. Okay, that's cool. I like the Iron Vega because it's the same price and they kind of make a stance for my people. And it's a good product. I'll fuck with that. I'll go that way. But I have seen so many companies do our people dirty, and we'll go right back up and line up in a store to go buy their shit. We'll go to their concert, we'll go all this stuff. Kanye West can say a bunch of hurtful stuff about my black community, but somehow, some way, you know what I mean? Now, if you were a black person, you made a consumer, we made a whole entire campaign and made it for real, and made it even for these other people who were fans of his, made it hard for them to be fans of his because they know what it is. Then you would see the money drop, and then you would see these people not being so bold. Black people get slapped in the face every day by somebody, made fun of by somebody, looked down upon on somebody who has trillions of dollars and who care less because they just know you're going to still buy my product anyway, right? So it's almost like, regardless, you shouldn't say anything. That's the way you should play it. If you're a consumer, your biggest consumer is. For instance, Hennessy, I know for a fact, will never make a racist statement. I've heard some things that way back in like the late 90s, and they actually stopped that. Right? I think someone said something, and I know Cristal made a statement. I don't know if Hennessy said anything, but I think they had said something at one point, and then they had a massive takeover because they found out, like literally, like if black people stop buying Hennessy, we're gonna like who's gonna buy this shit. So you notice how they've never made a stance against black people. They kind of just slowly, like I've been to Hennessy parties, they're very classy downtown. Me and my boy Steve went to a few, and they're great. And they don't have Hennessy bottles hanging out, like, you know what I mean? It's just, they just don't say anything. And if you're Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch, especially, you probably should have just shut the fuck up because you didn't make any stances regardless, right? So you said something that really, got your people, your consumer pretty pissed off. They showed you what's really going on around here. And that's, as black people, we need to continue to do that and do it on a massive scale. Not even continue, but do it on a very scale. If someone fucks around and does something and makes a stance and does them dirty and drops them, we stop buying their product. We show them the power of the dollar, and we make it consistent. Not just 20 people going viral for burning their shit. No, do it. And that's for everybody. So the lesson here is, one, stop acting like, but Anheuser-Busch, please stop acting like you didn't know who your demographic was. You know what I mean? Who drinks Bud Light? Shut up. I don't want to hear that. Okay, on your stance. And two, my point is also, as a black nation, talking to my own people, is that see what happens when you put your faith and your dollars as the action, right? When you say, all right, I ain't buying this shit, and we all ain't buying this shit. 40 million black people, all right? Well, if we can we can easily cost a lot of people some money, right? If you have a bank that they're not saying nothing, have all your people pull your shit out. Like certain things like that. We need to understand. I'm for the protest and all that shit, but I'm tired of the protesting as well. I'm not into the marching and picking up fences and fucking, the signs. I'm with strategic Babylonian crushing. That's what the fuck I'm about. You understand? So what you can do, the money. The money is the power. Take it away. Stop just, oh, that's fucked up, and you go buy whatever. Notice, you know what? Notice who doesn't say shit about certain things? McDonald's. You know why? Because it ain't even like you need to really eat that shit like that. The fact that they get away with raising prices on some fast food shit is enough already. But notice how they haven't come out and just made a huge stance on everything. Because people be like, fuck you, I ain't eating your shit. Could you imagine McDonald's making a stand doing the same thing? People would stop going to McDonald's, and that would hurt them crush them. This is a massive scale type of situation. So money's gonna get lost very quickly. So that's why you don't do certain things like that. And you don't need to be eating that shit. McDonald's please, I go up the street to the next 20,000 other fast food restaurants up the street. I can go to Wendy's, I can go to this, I can go to Five, I can go to Burger King, go there. A lot of competition in the fast food market. So none of them ain't saying shit like that unless they can afford to. And they can't. So stop acting like you didn't know your demographic. And that's how I'm going to go at it right now. So I hope I gave y'all something to think about, laugh about. I like to come on different angles on this situation, obviously. And I hope everyone has a great start to their week. Again, please let me know if there's anything, DM me or let me know if there's anything you'd like me to talk about. It's not hard for me to find things to talk about, but I want to make sure that I can, I don't want to do what Bud Light does and make the people who listen to me unhappy. Fucking idiots, man. Love y'all. One love.